Hi everyone, I hope you all are great. Today we'll finish up our lesson on the commas. First, you have to log in using the aplusstudent.com. Click on New Move on to Language at the grade 8. Chapter is commas and lesson will be commas review. Alright, so we'll start now. Use commas to separate the name of a person being spoken to from the rest of the sentence. So if you have the name of a person, right? Have to use a comma to separate it from the rest of the sentence. Just like how we have thank you, we have a comma, then Bella. Thank you, then comma, Bella, comma, for your help. So because there's more additional sentence after Bella, we still have to put a comma after that. Okay? So you have to make sure that you put a comma to separate the name of a person being spoken to from the rest of the sentence. That's something you need to note, okay? So that's the first part that we need to note. Also, we use a comma after words like yes, no, well, and many other words that are similar to this. So when they are followed by a complete sentence, you have to make sure that you put your comma, okay? Just like we have yes, then we have that sounds great. So you have no, I can't. So you say no, I can't. You have to make sure you put a comma in between no and the rest of the sentence. Then use a comma after a mild interjection. So, like, oh, what a stunning sunset. If you have a mild interjection or interrupter, like, you have to make sure that you add a comma. Okay. So we also have use commas around interrupters, which is a word, phrase, or clause that add additional non-essential information to the sentence. Okay, so if it's adding like informations that are not so necessary to the sentence, you have to make sure you put comma as well. Like you, of course, may have a different opinion. So after the interrupter, which is of course here, you have to make sure you put a comma to separate it from the rest of the sentence because it's adding informations that are not necessary. Okay. Now use commas to set up phrases that use the word not or unlike to qualify adjacent text. Okay. So we have Alexander the Great was Macedonian, not Greek. So we use commas to set up phrases that use the word not or unlike. Okay, so if you have not, so you have to use a comma. So we also have unlike, words like not or unlike. Tara, unlike Mega, finds chemistry fascinating. So you can see that we have a comma in between the unlike and then the not. Okay. So you have to use commas to separate three or more items in a series. Put a comma after each item in the first, in the list, except for the last one. So if you have a series of different items, you have to put commas for all of them except the last one. So the last comma in the list right before the coordinating conjunction is called an Oxford comma or a serial comma. The serial comma is sometimes considered optional, but most style guides demands you put your comma there. So we have red, white, and blue are the colors of the American flag. You can see we have the series, right, of items, and we put a comma except for the last, which is blue. We do not have to put a comma after the coordinating conjunction. Okay. All right, so we have expressions that consist of pair words such as thunder and lightning and bread and butter are generally treated as single item. So you do not put comma in between them. So college costs typically include tuition, room, and board and textbook. So words that are pairs, you don't put a comma in between them. In dates with a day and a year, use a comma after the day. Also use a comma after the year unless the date ends the sentence, okay? So as you can see, January 1, 2001, we'll put a comma after the day, okay, in between the day and the year. But because we have more sentence, we can put a comma after the year, okay, was the first day of the century. And then you can see over here, October 2, 1869. So we have a comma in between the day and the year, but we don't have a comma after that because it ends the sentence and there's no point adding any comma again, right? So when the name of a city is used with the name of its state or country, use a comma after the city. Also use a comma after the state or country unless it ends the sentence. So we have Chicago, Illinois, and is known as the Windy City. So we have Chicago, we have Illinois. So there's a comma in between. And there's also a comma after Illinois because it is having additional sentences. Okay, so it's not the last. But over here, you can see we have just booked our flight to Athens, Greece. It's the ending, so you don't need to add a comma after Greece. Okay. So, in a compound sentence, you have to use a comma before the coordinating conjunction that joins two independent clauses. Examples of coordinating conjunctions are and, but, or so. So, in a compound sentence, you have to put a comma in between them, okay? We saw a flash of lightning, and seconds later, we heard the rumble of thunder. So, you can see that in between the two independent clauses, before this coordinating conjunction, we have to make sure we put our and. Okay. So in a complex sentence, if a dependent clause comes before an independent clause, you use a comma after the dependent clause. A dependent clause is one that starts with a subordinating conjunction. We have after, although, as, because, before, if, since, unless, until, when, or while. So if she ever gets the chance, Terry would love to visit the Egyptian pyramids. So as you can see, the dependent clause comes first. So you have to make sure that you put a comma to separate it from the independent clause. Okay? All right, so let's look at some examples. So it says what? Correct the text by inserting two commas. Note, in this skill, serial commas are not optional. Smallpox is a dangerous disease, true, but should the only existing sample of the smallpox virus be destroyed? So where should we have a comma? So you put your comma in between true, okay? Because why's that? Why we putting our comma in between? Over here we can see that it is what? It's an interrupter, okay? So in between the interrupter, you have to put a comma with the rest of the sentence. Okay? All right, then. Should I ladle the beef broth into the serving bowls yet, Chef Russell? So we have to put one comma. So where are we inserting our comma? So we will insert that where? Yet. So we have yet and then Chef Russell. So we have to put our comma before the chef. Okay. So let's go to the test. Share your answers with me if you know them. So we have Cornelia Hesses Honegger, an artist and scientist, scientific illustrator based in Zurich, Switzerland, draws insects that have been affected by radiation explosion. So two commas. Where should we insert the first or the second? Okay, so we have the first one. So remember, we have to put a comma in between the city and the country. Okay, before the bed and breakfast opened, the only place to stay around here was at the motor launch just off the highway. What is the right place inside the comma? First or second? So what do we have? The first one. Okay. So the novel is an all-time favorite of mine. The film, however, leaves something to be desired. First to second. So we have the first one. Yes, Holliston Hill is the oldest continually running ski area in Colorado. First to second. Okay, after Nan Wood Graham posed for the painting American Gothic, some viewers called her the American Mona Lisa. First or second? So we have what? The first one. So seaweed doesn't sound like an appealing food, I'm afraid, but it is loaded with vitamins and minerals. First or second? Okay, so what do we have? The first one. President George Washington delivered the first State of the Union address on January 8, 1790. First or second? So we have the first. In 1960, almost three quarters of Algerian Morocco was destroyed by earthquake and its powerful aftershocks. First or second? So we have the first. Remember, we have to put a comma in between the city, the country. So when Osumi, Japan's first satellite, was launched into orbit, Japan became the world's fourth space power. First or second? Okay, so what do we have? The first one. Our solar system five dwarf planets are Ceres, Pluto, Human, Makemake, and Aries. First or second? So we have what? The first one. This is like having a series and then adding commas to the series. The Waka Water Tower relies on condensation to pull water from the air, and it is used to provide clean drinking water to remote villages in Africa. First to second. All right, so we have the first. On March 19, 2014, the University of Southern California purchased a letter written by Lewis Carroll, author of Alice Adventure in Wonderland, for $19,959. First to second. So we have the first one. Should I ladle the beef brought into the serving bowl yet, Chef Russell? First or second? Okay, we have the first one. The SS Central America sank in 1857, but nearly 1,000 ounces of gold were recovered from the ship in May 2014. First to second. Alright, so we have the first one. Okay, that's it for our lesson today under the commas review. Can you tell me if you have any questions? Alright, since we have no questions, we'll end here. Try to complete this lesson if you haven't done it. See you next time. Bye.